This is the UC Hunting Properties Podcast, your home for all things recreational land. Our goal, to help you stand on your investment. Hey guys, welcome back to the UC Hunting Properties Podcast. We're going to make a special edition episode today because I'm hoping this is very educational. Our guest today is Skip Sligh, buddy of mine, land investment manager extraordinaire, big buck killing machine. Skip's been a resident of Iowa now for a few decades. Anybody that's in the game knows Skip because he's bought, sold, and traded literally hundreds of farms at this point. But I'll let Skip give a little deeper dive into his background. But last week, one of our member agents, Brett Brown, Buckhorn Land down in central Missouri. Brett's a great guy, strong crew. He did a Facebook Live because it's concerning enough for them. He's hearing from a lot of his clients they're finding dead deer. Almost all of them arguably are going to be linked back to EHD. And it sounds like it's pretty widespread down there. I know we're in a similar boat up here in Iowa. We're going to, we'll talk some statistics on that. But Skip manages a lot of land, has eyeballs on a lot of land throughout the state and some other adjoining states. And I want to dive into it because I don't know if anyone's managing their deer herd, more seriously than Skip. I think there's some, at par with him, but I think we couldn't have somebody with a bigger periphery on the situation as a whole. So Skip, without further ado, buddy, appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I can't help but gawk and stare at that row of giants behind you, Skip.
This is my man cave.
I like your man cave.
I come down to the farm to work. This is my little farmhouse, and I can enjoy this. I don't have any mounts at my house with my wife and kids, so I keep them all here. And then I'll pop outside and get my work done, which is what I'm doing after this.
Right on. Nope, it is time. Anything land management related, it's we're moving into crunch season for sure. Skip, give us just a brief background. I mean, you've been on a bazillion podcasts from some of the biggest ones. We Are Hunter, and I think you've been on Working Class Bow Hunter. I mean, you've been on a ton of the big platforms, but give our listeners a little background who Skip Sligh is if they don't know you.
I'm just a obsessed city boy who started maybe at 10 years old getting into hunting and outdoors, and I'd always get out of the city, and I was always interested in animals, wildlife, biology, ecology, and I pretty much, when I got into hunting, I gave up all the sports that I was obsessed with, and I was obsessed. And just dove in because I loved it ever since. And, I worked in the medical field coming out of college, and that gave me a lot of insight into sifting through data, studies, going through pretty much anything that, can relate to disease, and, anything that has to do with hunting. It's nice to kind of have a medical background to apply some of that previous knowledge and to continue to learn and understand what's going on with the whitetail.
Well, there's a lot of crossover, right? I mean, biology is biology, and if you understand the basics of it, you can at least have an intelligent conversation. But
yeah, and you don't need to go to school for this stuff. I mean, to understand common sense biology and ecology, when you're around the farm, around farming, around wildlife, around, different types of populations and animals and dynamics, just experience around this stuff builds a lot of knowledge. And there's the other thing is just I've been around this stuff for decades, and not having a job now where all my job is farming, managing farms, growing crops, trying to make my farms better. This is all I've done for decades, and in countless different areas in Iowa and other states, Kansas, and then, the amount of different states around the Midwest I've been to, hunted, owned in. It's been a lot of really good experiences that have just taken decades to build, and just a lot of fun along the way.
Now, I was gonna put you on the spot a little bit, Skip, because you did a really good job avoiding the question on the We Are Hunter podcast when you guys got into the 200 conversation. But I want to. Number one, Skip killed an absolute giant. I think that was your personal best in November, right? The whatever 238 or some freak. I mean, it's a giant.
Yeah, he was a decent one. Yeah, that's my personal best.
Okay.
He's in the 230s. Um, and yeah, old deer at his
Yeah.
full potential. That's what was cool for me. Um, if he was 230s and he was a 4-year-old and he was spindly, I mean, 99% of guys would be just as happy, but it would maybe bug me a little bit if I was like, he's a young one and he scores really well, but he's not at
Sure.
his potential. But the fact that he was 7.5 years old and he went from probably 180 at 6 to 230s at 7. I mean,
But
he was at the peak.
Skip, you think even as a 5-year-old he'd have been flirting at 200, and you guys let him walk. I mean, you made the decision to let him walk, right? Oh boy,
Yeah,
I hear antlers.
so here he is at 5.
Wow.
Okay. So this shed, one of these sheds was like it's like 105 or something.
Yep.
I think he was 207 or 210, something like that. So
Wow.
here he was at 5. I let him go. I mean, very visible, very killable. And then here he is at 6. So he got a lot smaller. He's probably 180s, maybe 190s. I didn't actually
And
score
Skip,
the.
you're not 100% positive. I mean, obviously you knew this deer super well, had him well documented, but as far as you know, you couldn't tell that he got injured or wounded, or like you're not sure what would have maybe caused the dip.
I I would suspect it was probably like parasite or sickness related, like a virus, or maybe he got EHD that year. Um, Maybe he got a bad case of lungworms. Maybe he got an infection. Maybe he got gored by another deer and healed up and was okay. I mean, there's just a million different things that can
Right.
happen. Here, I've got his sheds back to 3. This was him at 4, by the way. And I
Wow.
don't know where the kids always run off with a lot of these sheds. So I know I
Sure.
have the other side to him, and I have his 3-year-old, but there's all his sheds, and yeah, I mean, there's
Cool
so many.
story.
It's just like people. You're like, hey, that person's all run down and sickly looking. Well, what could it be? Well, it could be a
Right.
million things, and whatever it was, he rebounded from it. So I mean, he and a lot of guys would have said, hey, there's a 6-year-old, and I don't blame him. I'm not saying it like this, but a lot of guys would have said, hey, he's 6, he's 180 inches, I'm shooting him, and I
Right.
don't blame him for doing that. It's just I know he went down so much, and I was willing to say, "Hey, maybe he's just gonna die," and he lived out the rest of his days and never see him again. And I was not okay with it, but I was okay with it. I was willing to roll the dice, and
Yeah.
this one worked out well. And I've had ones that didn't work out well, where I'm
Sure.
like, "Dag nabbit-all." I never saw him again. I found
Well,
him
and
dead. You
if
name it.
uh, Skip also owns and operates iowawhitetail.com, and if you're listening and you want like kind of a single source for a ton of information, forum style, I don't know if there'd be a better website just in general. But I bring that up because on Skip's YouTube channel or the iowawhitetail.com channel, um, they have a hunt that they filmed and produced with Skip's brother, and a giant deer. Danger, right?
Angry,
Or angry,
angry.
angry.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah. I was like, I can't keep track of all these names anymore, but
yeah. Who
that's a
can?
right. That's a pretty cool story, and I love watching that. I probably watched it 10 times already because your brother's like just raw emotion that they captured on video was legit. Like the throughout the whole thing, that's a pretty cool story, and that's like a 240 something.
Yeah, 241.
Wow.
And I'd say my raw emotion throughout that whole thing was as intense and crazy as you can get
Yeah,
to. And I mean, I didn't even shoot the deer. Uh,
just
and I
help
mean,
grow it.
yeah, yeah. And watched that deer since he was a young deer, and he exploded from 6 to 7 as well. Um, and when my brother finally got that thing, I mean, that was, to get deer way into the twos, where I grew up. No, you're not going to see a 200 in your lifetime.
Right.
You're probably not going to see a 170s in your lifetime. So to be around a deer or to see a deer to be able to hunt a deer of that caliber is just so rare, and I understand that. So um, Yeah, it's just like, you've done this for 30 years, intensely loved it, obsessive. And the small bucks I shot when I was younger, I was just as thrilled and
Right.
excited too. I mean, but to finally, after 30 years, get a deer like that, it's crazy.
It's
I
next
mean,
level, right?
yeah,
Well,
it's, it,
and
it, I love it.
I thought it was cool. Right? I shouldn't say thought. I think this is super cool. But your boy Charlie, that's been now documented numerous times on Midwest Whitetail, and obviously he had a great season. I can see the fire in his eyes too, Skip. Like I don't think there's going to be a big devil safe on you for about the next 30 years with him.
Yeah,
And it's
I
fun to
think
see.
he'll be running the show here pretty soon as far as Uh, I mean, he probably hunted more than I did this year. He would just go out and sit where I'm like, "Yeah, I'll cook dinner for you guys." And I think that's just the progression of, um, me getting a little bit older,
Yeah,
picking my times when I hunt, and him getting into that phase where he's just young, obsessed, just wants to be out there. I mean, if it
hungry.
was 80 degrees, he'd go out. He just likes to sit, and I love that he likes to do that too. So,
Yep.
um, I want him. He's very much appreciative for the spoiled and blessed situation that we're in now, but he also doesn't get anything handed to him, and he puts in a lot of work. He has a job. He pays for a lot of his own stuff, and the deer he shoots, he's got to put in the work.
Yeah, he's earning
So
them.
no
And
doubt about it.
in the famous words of my it'd be my grandmother-in-law Carol Hove, she always says there's no such thing as spoiled, it's just very well loved.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, There I've been pretty conscious about how I've done things, how hey, there's a 190-inch deer that comes into this spot that I know. I'm not gonna send my boy out there
Right.
on his first year and be like, "Yep, go ahead, son." I'm not gonna do it. And he's around. I mean, he comes to this cabin as well as my wife and my daughter, frequently, weekly, and he'll do chores with me. He drives a tractor now. He's 13. He'll be 14 here shortly, and he can get his farm driving permit.
Sure.
So inside the farm, he's constantly driving trucks and tractors and helping.
He's
And
getting her figured
he
out.
yeah, he sees how much work it is. It's just a
Yeah.
massive amount of work, but I love doing it. Not everybody, very few people are going to do this level of work and intensity or want to, um, but I love it, and he loves it too. So, um, leaving these farms in top tier shape and putting a lot into it. I mean, it's not done incredibly often, but um, some people almost, I don't know if the right word is, dislike it or are jealous of that or something. But I'm like, listen, there's so many farms that are managed exceptionally well, where the whole ecology, the soil erosion, the how just everything about it is
Yep.
managed to a top level that leaves it far better than what you found it. There's so many farms that you can reference that are managed that way. I applaud anybody who does it that way because it is so rare. And guys want to talk about, like, well, so and so shoots big deer because they have this massive amount of land they put a lot of work into, time into, money into. Well, that's 0.00001% of all the farms out there. So let's not focus on the 1 in 10,000 guy that's putting extreme amounts, giving back, helping the herd,
Yep.
helping the land. Let's talk about the 99 point some percent that aren't really doing anything to the land, or maybe even the guys that are, running 1,000 cattle on a piece that should be running 100 and running it into the ground.
Right.
People don't talk about that. So
Well, and Skip, I'm kind of glad you said it the way you just said it, because I mean I think that is the bigger picture, and I think that's part of what pulled you into getting involved with the Iowa Sportsman's Club, the Iowa Bow Hunters Association. You've been an instrumental part on legislation and some of the push, and getting that voice heard, as a whole. Because you're right. I mean, it was all about keeping Iowa great, because it is a very limited resource in Iowa. I know everyone perception wise thinks Iowa's land of the giants and they're kind of everywhere, but the reality is our state's an ag state that has some fringe deer hunting. Let's be honest. So I'm glad you brought up the point that it does seem like, by and large, the majority of the states just whatever, and then there's a handful, and I mean a handful of people taking management to the next level, and it almost creates a fake perception of what Iowa really is, because I would argue Iowa's declined the last 20 plus years. I mean, I think the golden years, and I hope we see it rebound, but I think the best of the best of the best would have been, call it from the late 90s through maybe '05, 2005. I think that was about the peak of deer numbers, big bucks getting killed, harvest numbers, you name it. And we could have a whole podcast about that, Skip.
Let me address it real quick.
Fire.
So I agree with you. The golden years probably were around to 2010.
Fair enough.
It is probably 1% of the farms in Iowa that are that top level, amazingly managed farm. And when I sit here and advocate for improving the regulations and making a better age structure across the state, on having better regulations, which regulations define all. Regulations are what are going to define good or bad hunting. Period. End of story.
Fact.
Um, when I advocate for all this stuff, that's not about me. I'm set for having a great farm. I'm set for the rest of my life on having a great experience. So it's not about me. A lot of people that are getting into deer regulations, deer management, they have their own angle, their own hidden motives. I want to sell this. I want to make money off of sectioning up farms. I want to sell products, whatever. I want to get crossbows approved in Iowa so I can make millions of dollars. I don't have a motive. I want to see it better for everybody. And my point is to have a balanced age structure with some mature bucks on the whole landscape is better for everybody. And I'd like somebody to point out to me what the downside is of having a balanced age structure across the whole state. What I care about is the average hunter who's on the average piece of land. I want them to have an opportunity at a mature buck at a reasonable, you know, having a reasonable chance at it.
Yep.
So, in a lot of these areas, the little guy who hunts in 80 acres by permission, they're the ones that are hurting right now the worst. The average farms have been decimated, whether it's EHD regulations, lack of deer, deer being wiped out of an area. They're the ones that have been hurt, and those are the ones that I want to see lifted up. So I want to lift the whole system up. I want to see the whole system lifted up so it's better for everybody.
Yeah.
And listen, the guys that show up on the weekends just to blast stuff, they're going to be there either way. The only way they quit is if there's no deer, which is happening. But when you make the age class better for everybody, at least it's not just catering to the serious hunters, but it helps everybody.
Yeah.
And it helps instead of all this focus on these tiny little areas that are managed well. Now the whole state's good again, and that's what we had 20 years ago. Does it need to be exactly like it was 20 years ago? No, but the population and the harvest data, I mean, we're in half, and we're probably trending. We're probably trending to significantly less than half in 20 years. So really, the fundamental change is we've got this big state, which is kind of a rectangle, and the top 2/3 of it, the deer numbers have gone to in some neighborhoods almost to nothing. Very, very
Northwest
few.
Iowa's in bad shape. Bad
Horrible,
shape.
horrible shape. So 2/3 of this state is almost void of deer. Even in some of the regions where you're like, well, there's river bottom and there should be a lot of deer, and there's only a small handful. And those people that live in those areas are just quitting.
Right.
They're fair weather hunters. When there's a lot of deer, they'll hunt. Just like when there was a lot of pheasants. A lot of pheasants, there was a ton of pheasant hunters. Look at how fast that changed. Pheasant numbers went off a cliff. Nobody pheasant hunted anymore. It's kind of coming back now, which is great. Deer hunting's much the same way. And we've taken 2/3 of the state, taken out the habitat, issued crazy quotas for does, annihilated it, had EHD outbreaks, let the politicians run the show with deer quotas, which is basically Farm Bureau running the show,
100%.
and let them dictate policy. And what really changed when I say about 2008 to 2010 is when we started to go down. I'll give you one succinct point that happened. Branstad got in charge then, the governor of Iowa, and he took the power away from the DNR. He basically said, in a really simplistic terms, DNR, you can no longer have an opinion. You cannot voice out. Us, the politicians, are the ones that now have the power, and he transferred the power to the politicians. And the politicians are influenced by the special interests.
Yep.
So the DNR was essentially neutered. from Branstad, and that needs to be reversed. So a discussion for another day, but you'll
Right.
probably hear more about that. The DNR needs to be more empowered than they are. They need to not be neutered, and we need to reverse the policies that Branstad put in place when he was in office. He was an absolute disaster for the deer herd of Iowa. Now, my last fine point on this: do we need to make it so our numbers are like what they were in 2008? Not necessarily, but some of these regions are just so low, so devastated. We just need to bring these numbers up. And really, the lowest hanging fruit and the easiest solution to fix this state is just to let the deer numbers come up in these really low deer density areas, lowering quotas, not allowing all these crazy amount of antlerless tags to be um, given out, which we have done that to some extent. And the other last one is we need to get the late shed buck season with rifles eliminated. It's an absolute disaster.
Right.
Needs
And
to go.
we're actually going to go there, Skip, because I got a few of the new pending legislation or bills that are getting per se debated. We're going to hit on that, but I want to circle back. You brought up the point that there's some super managed ground, but by and large, the majority is arguably nothing's happening to it, right?
Yep.
And it's a permission situation in most cases, and four guys are on an 80 or two guys are on an 80 or whatever the case is. That's the normal, right? And that's what I want to focus on, because the DNR is on record right now saying that the EHD breakout we had last fall is the second worst in history. They're saying there are. Go ahead.
It's the worst outbreak now.
Okay, so they have flipped it now.
Yeah, it's the worst
Okay, so
outbreak.
as of late last week, and my data may be slightly off, but this is from late last week. They were saying, it was the second. Skip, if they've moved it to
It
first, I would probably.
splitting hairs.
Yeah, it doesn't
Splitting
matter.
hairs.
They were saying that 3,200 plus reported cases, and literally 94 out of 99 counties had a reported case. So all of that said, here's my synopsis. If there's 3,200 being reported, there's 6,000, maybe more. Who the hell knows?
Okay. So the DNR has came out with substantial data on this. There's been several studies. Don't ask me why they were done. I actually do know, but I won't get into the reasons on why these studies were done.
Sure.
The best one is a study done in Indiana where they took trained biologists and they put this is so they could try and discover, disease outbreaks and recover deer and test them. So
Mm-hmm.
what they did was they took like several thousand acres and they put like, I'm making this up, but like 100 deer throughout the landscape and put them in kind of a natural form. And they did this several times, and there's been several studies on this and what the recovery rate was. And they sent a group of biologists out to find the deer. So, hey, there's a bunch of dead deer out there. Go find them. And the best data we have from all those studies that have been done, Indiana is just one example. And the DNR knows a lot more about this than I do, and they've cited these studies. But the best data we have is that there's a 10% recovery rate of dead deer.
10%.
So
Okay.
10%. So on the best data we can find, if there's 3,200 documented cases of EHD, at the minimum, there's 32,000 that really did occur,
Wow.
according to the best data. Now, this is also guys who were going out with the intention of finding dead deer. My question to anybody listening is, how many guys don't go out to their land in August and September because there's mosquitoes and midges and all this stuff bugging you, and you don't want to be outside because it's 90 degrees, and you're not going to go look in your cattails for a dead deer. You're not going to go by your ponds. You're not going to go through the brush.
Right.
That's the majority of people. You're not going to even find the deer. My next question is, when you do find the deer, how many of those people are reporting it? My answer or my hypothesis would be a small fraction of that.
Mm-hmm.
So 32,000 at a minimum. My real answer, if I mean,
Can I
getting to reality,
let me intervene
yeah,
for just 1 second, Skip, because I do agree with the logic you're saying. So let's just say the number's 32,000. I want people to realize that the state of Iowa in all seasons combined literally shoots around 100,000. So at 32,000, we are talking a third of what would have normally been taken is off the map to even be taken, which then
yep,
compounds because they're shooting what's left. And I mean, I'm painting a picture, I think,
yeah,
but it's this is super severe. Like, and I don't feel like it's getting near enough press. But anyway, continue.
No. So I would say the number's more like 50,000. In reality, how many people don't report the deer? They say, "Yeah, I found a dead EHD deer or I found a dead deer." I'm not going to take the time to go report this. It's
Yeah.
a huge number of people. And then the other group, like I said, were the people that don't even go look or don't find them. So I would say it's 50,000. There's no
Wow.
way somebody's going to convince me it's less than 50,000. There's no way. Now, here's the key is last year our data was just about as high. So 2 years in a row of 50,000 deer in a population less than 500,000 with harvest data around 100,000.
Yep.
2 years in a row combined, we lost 100,000 deer, in my opinion, in my strong belief. That's significant.
Well, it's like
And
having
then
another season.
and so everybody thinks the deer population is what they see in their little region. What they don't realize is they might be in a region where deer numbers are pretty good. You
Hmm.
go out to western Iowa and there's no deer in a lot of these
Decimated,
counties.
right?
I had a buddy who had 640 acres in Harrison County, Iowa. He said, "Hey, can I come out to your farm and I'll shoot a management buck, I'll shoot whatever." And he came out. I said, "What's the deal?" And he was hunting first shotgun. He's like, "I've seen 3 deer in 3 days hunting my 640 acres, and it's timber with food plots. It's a mecca. 3 deer." I said, "What would it have been like 2 or 3 years ago?" He's like, "I probably would have saw 50 or 100 in 3 days."
Wow.
And he came to my farm and he's like, "My farm is not overloaded with deer. It's not." He's like, "Your farm has millions of deer. I said, "So just 9-day difference?" He's like, "Oh my gosh." And he's a very sharp guy who understands that whole area of western Iowa. He said it's like that on most of the farms out there, just
Sad.
devastated.
Yeah.
I said, "Where are all the deer?" And I knew the answer, but he's like, "Dead in creeks."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "It's that bad?" He's like, "Dude, you have no idea. This is night and day just driving, 2 hours over to my farm and hunting." He's like, "It's night and day difference." So, whatever your region is, some people be like, "Hey, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Deer numbers in my area are great." And they think the whole state's like that. It's
Right.
not. Some areas are doing fine. Some areas are just absolutely devastated, and then everything in between.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is the average farm out there across the state, that's an average, is hurting substantially compared to 5 and 10 years ago.
Well, and,
You know,
and and I try to keep it in perspective too, Skip, because I mean, up here in Northeast Iowa, we just have more topography, right? We have more running water, we have more moving water. And I've always felt like EHD was less prevalent here than say in southern Iowa, where you guys have a lot of ponds, right? But the reality is, I've talked to numerous people that were finding EHD deer dead around here, and in some cases, some substantial finds. So I don't know what I don't know about how EHD is evolving. What I do know is the benchmark in our state seems like it's always been balanced around CWD, right? And I think there's major confusion in the public's mind about zombie deer and all the scare tactics they were trying to, throw at us about CWD. Now, all of that said, Skip, I'm going to start this by literally saying this, and I got some stats. I want to just talk through these, and I think you're familiar with a lot of the CWD claims, but people just heard what the EHD status looks like in the great state of Iowa. It's bad. Um, CWD, on the other hand, which, dude, I have personally killed more deer than CWD in the state of Iowa. That's a fact. And as have you, Skip. So getting into this, like, I mean, CWD, they would claim there's been 400-ish positives in about 26 counties. So same thing, a third of the counties have had a CWD positive test. And I'm going to jump specifically to the 24 data. They took 4,300 samples. And I will give the DNR the benefit of the doubt. It's somewhere around 25 of those, they're calling a positive. I think 19 were 100% positive, and there's 6 with a question mark. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, give them all 25. 25 out of 4,300, we are talking about a 0.005% infection rate. Now, from everything I could tell, Skip, EHD, even if we're on the low end of the spectrum, there's been 3,200. Those are dead. Those are guaranteed dead. We know it's more than that, whether it's 30,000, 50,000, whatever. Shit pile of deer are dead from EHD this year. They literally found 25 that supposedly have CWD, and from everything I can get, the reason they always talk about EHD, but then they always say some recover, some die. But you just pointed out it's probably 10% based on some data, and they're saying CWD is always fatal. Now, all of that said, there's, as far as I'm aware, there's never been a reported case of this deer definitively died of CWD. It could die with it, like it has it, like the test they're doing, but I've never heard of anyone tell me CWD killed a deer in the state of Iowa. Am I
And
nuts?
no, I don't think so. So I'll try and unpack this one piece at a time. One, the public needs to have a lot more education around the difference between EHD and CWD.
Yep.
Those things get so intertwined all the time. Hey man, I found a bunch of dead deer in my palm from that CWD thing. You know, I mean, and to their credit, and I mean, they're both three-letter acronyms, right? EHD, CWD. Who the normal person cannot keep these two apart, and
Correct.
they intertwine them so much. One of them's a misfolded protein, one of them's a virus. So they're totally different diseases, and this needs to be succinctly explained to the public that they are different. One's caused by a virus, one's caused by a folded protein, according to the DNR and according to that side of the research. Now, on the CWD front, you've got extremes in both sides. You have one extreme that says CWD will be the extinction of the white-tailed deer. I've heard it a ton of times. It will wipe the deer out. And then those same people are the ones that have spent tens to hundreds of millions of dollars in Wisconsin shooting all the deer. The same types of guys that are sharp shooting deer over corn piles in Missouri. You know, it's the extinction of the white-tailed deer. Okay, the extinction of the white-tailed deer. So we're going to kill all the deer to slow a disease that's going to kill all the deer. Okay, got it. And we're going to spend tens of millions of dollars to do it.
Yep.
Uh, and and anybody would recognize that what Wisconsin's approach was an utter failure, was a waste of an immense amount of money, tens to hundreds of millions of dollars, and you can't even calculate for the losses in how many hunters have quit, how many hunters said, "Oh, I can't eat the meat. I can't do anything with the meat." They put so many regulations on this. I'm just not going to hunt anymore. I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
And you go to those regions, and the hunters there, and I talked to a lot of them. The hunters there would say, "Hey, we kind of let off. We said, you know, our last approach was wrong." The DNR would probably admit their approach was wrong, and they've let things just kind of go back to normal. Now, there's some data that says that Iowa County in Wisconsin's deer population, which is the highest CWD cases, is slowly going down, but it's still a mixed bag on the impact there. Really, when people stop shooting the deer in the CWD areas, the numbers actually went up. They went up substantially. So, and let's just unpack CWD in a nutshell. So, like I said, on one side you have guys that say, you know, it's the extinction of the white-tailed deer. On the other side of it, there's guys that say it's the COVID
I'm one of them
the
guys.
deer world. Fair enough. Fair enough. It's the COVID of the deer world. It's not real. Why aren't you looking at data like what humic acid can do for CWD? You know, and there's something called functional extinction. So if you had a disease that killed a white-tailed deer, every white-tailed deer by the age of 6 months, that animal would be extinct.
Yep.
Functional extinction would be, you know, you could get enough to survive and they can't reproduce. Like the American chestnut is functionally extinct. They're still living American chestnuts, okay, because of the blight, but they can't reproduce. So eventually they will go away. But what happens with white-tailed deer with CWD is a lot of these CWD deer will be 5, 6, 7 years old, and they'll say, well, they just got it later in life, but they're able to reproduce for several seasons. And you say, well, they can still only live to 5 or 6 years old. Well, my question would be, how many states around the country do deer not reach 5 and 6 years old because of bullets and arrows? It's the vast majority.
And
The vast
vehicles.
majority. Right. So if it were true that the deer live to 5 and 6 years old, they're not functionally extinct. You know, they can continue to reproduce. Most deer don't live to 5 to 6 in most states anyways. They get
Right.
shot. So then it's a big nothing. Now, the fundamental point I want to make on CWD is this. If the premise is correct, that is a prion that stays in the soil and the landscape forever. You cannot burn it, you cannot treat it, you can do nothing to destroy that prion. It is there forever. You can take every deer off that landscape for 100 years, and in 100 years later, if we do not have a cure or there's not some sort of natural immunity or resistance to that prion, 100 years later, you will put deer back there and they will just get CWD
They'll
again. It
start
will just
over.
repeat.
Right.
So without a cure, all this is for nothing. If we take the premise that that prion is in the soil forever, and that's the problem, and that's what's causing the deer to die. Now, the other thing is that prion can be transmitted by hay. So you go bale your hay, and you move it to another farm, that prion goes with it. It can be transmitted by crows and coyotes that ate a dead deer carcass and go 5 miles down the road, and the prions start over there. And you look at those areas in Wisconsin was the epicenter for CWD back in the days. I couldn't move a deer. I couldn't do anything with a deer. Processing deer was impossible, and I had to
Yep.
dispose of it in certain ways, so regulated, so restricted. But one of their biggest industries there is baling hay and selling it all over the country. So I couldn't move a deer, but I could move hay bales all over the
Mhm.
country. It didn't make any sense, and it doesn't make any sense. So my point is, if the premise is taken that the prion stays in the soil forever, which is what every bit of data suggests that the
Yep.
DNR or anybody else puts out, without a cure, you can kill all the deer. It is a complete waste of time. It is all for nothing without a cure or natural resistance. Now, are they researching for a cure? Very minimal. They're spending far more time and money into testing than searching for a cure. There is some testing going on. ISU is doing some research into it. The deer breeders are putting a lot of money into the research, but the vast majority of the money spent for CWD is testing and killing. So testing and killing is where all the money is going. My 2 cents on that is take that money and put it all into research into a cure, because all this testing and killing is for nothing without a cure. So put it into a cure and take at least a portion of those funds, if not all of those funds, and divert them into testing, into research into EHD, because EHD is a far bigger impactor. It's far more devastating. And what people need to understand, EHD is not native to North America. These strains or serotypes of EHD that these deer are getting, they are not. They do not have built-in antibodies to these. They are not immune to it. These are new strains that came over from Asia or Africa about 100 years ago. The first documented case was in the 1950s of EHD in deer. Now, you have EHD and you have blue tongue, and there's different strains or serotypes of each. Iowa has got hit by 2 strains of EHD, all new to these deer. And the last strain that hit was in 2019, and that was a new strain, and that's probably what is hitting you guys today. Extremely deadly. So people need to understand EHD is very new. And that's why back in the day, if you're old enough, you'd remember the Milk River getting wiped out.
Mhm.
They had no resistance to EHD. Iowa deer, Northeast Iowa deer had no resistance to EHD. Western Iowa, those guys would constantly say, "Hey, we don't get it over here. We
Right.
don't get it." Same with Northeast. And what happened is they went so long without getting it that when it was introduced, where it had been in other regions like South Central, we got it several times. So we had some resistance. When it hit you guys, it's just so much more devastating because there is no antibodies
Yep.
present, and there is maternal antibodies that are passed on to fawns. How long it lasts is variable, but um, antibodies in the system and have it circulating through the system, resistance can be built. So that's the silver lining that's good for EHD. Resistance will be built, but if your area has not been hit before, these new serotypes are absolutely devastating. And if anybody wants to know where it comes from, very, very likely, most likely, with data, with a whole lot of evidence, it's coming from cattle. So you've got a area around you where the guy goes and buys cattle at an auction. No fault of his. I understand it. And he ships those down. Hey, man, I just bought a load of cattle from Oklahoma. Well, he's shipping in cattle that are hosting that virus. Okay, whether it's EHD or blue tongue, it most likely is EHD because blue tongue's generally pretty fatal, pretty drastic on cattle, and they're treating that. But when cattle have EHD, which is deadlier on deer, they're bringing it in. The cow might just have the sniffles, the cold. People don't notice this stuff. So they're bringing these deer that are harboring the virus into these new neighborhoods. And then when the midges come out and they start biting the cattle, then they're the vector. And then they bite deer, and it's just a wildfire. That's why it's regional too. It
Yep.
just spreads. So you got your cattle here, your deer here, and the biting starts, and it just spreads like a wildfire, and it peters out for whatever reason. Midge density. I mean, a whole bunch of
Right.
variables there,
Right.
but it'll peter out. And the bottom line with the EHD, we could get a new serotype that the deer are not used to. We still have a lot of resistance to be built, especially northeast and western Iowa. But since western Iowa got so devastated, the remaining deer likely have some antibodies. And you go down to like Kansas, where I have land at, and they had EHD really, really bad about 20 to 30 years ago. And it's really now you don't really see it. So they built resistance to the different strains down there. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's very infrequent, and that's the hope or the silver lining that happens in Iowa.
No, and I'm glad you're pointing that out because I mean, obviously EHD is something. The more we have it, and I hate to say that because we're losing a lot of deer, but the more we have it, likely the less we have it moving forward. I mean, similar to what you're saying in Kansas. And obviously, my concern is the fact that we're having it at the levels we're having it. Maybe it is the strain that you guys took the beating in 19 on. Maybe that's what we have here now. I don't know. I just know
It is.
historically, growing up here, like very seldom did you hear about a case of blue tongue because it was always blue tongue up until whatever the last 10 years. But I do distinctly remember like 20 some years ago, a group finding a deer, tongue was swollen. It was next to the river. It happened to be like a booner. I mean, it was a tank. And the sheriff came out and dispatched the deer, and they had the deer, but hey, it had EHD. Now, the correlation with cattle really makes sense to me because Northeast Iowa's cattle country USA. I mean, Elmakey County has a boatload of cattle. And to your point, Skip, some of them come from all over the place, right? Like, so it's interesting, and I guess the point I really wanted to get across is there are areas, Central Missouri, like I mentioned, Brett Brown and his team and their clients talking about it. It's spreading, and in my opinion, the severity of EHD is way more serious than CWD, and we got to get people thinking that way. And in my 2 cents, like the money needs to get shifted. I could
The
care
po-
less. I like I said, I'm probably on the far end of the spectrum, Skip. I think it's a money grab. I think CWD is a money grab. I'm not saying it's not real. I mean, I think it's a thing. But I think the effect of the thing is totally overplayed. Um,
yeah, and if it is a thing, and I'm not saying it's not, then we need to be focused on a cure. Now, what I would say is you have to give credit where credit's due. The Iowa DNR has done exceptionally good job with CWD compared to other states that have
yep.
taken the approach of let's wipe out all the deer, let's hire sharpshooters, let's spend tens to hundreds of millions of dollars to kill things off and to throw money at the problem. Iowa has not done that. Iowa's spent the tune of probably a couple $100,000 a year on CWD testing. There, I suppose there's a cost to what they're doing now with this late shed buck season. That the justification is CWD. Um, the reason that this late shed buck season is around though is not because of the DNR; it's because of the politicians. So I would say fundamentally, if people want to complain, don't complain to the Iowa DNR. They've done an exceptional job, and they've done an exceptionally better job
Than
than
most
any
of the
one of our
states.
neighbors.
Well, and,
Yes.
and Skip, I'm sure you've seen this, but I mean, they just pulled out of southern Minnesota, well, namely southeast Minnesota, had been hammering, the whole bait pile, kill them all scenario in like Houston and Fillmore counties. They just stopped it. And I don't know why. I
About
mean, I
time.
well, I 100% agree because it's some of the best hunting in the country. And they were wiping them out. And same thing, I got plenty of buddies with ground up there, and they're like, dude, you wouldn't believe the decline in our deer numbers. And I'm like, no, I would. Like, I would because we've watched it happen.
And there's why I do think it's a money grab and this is a small, quote unquote, a small issue, but when you talk about sharpshooters, you're paying dudes big money to throw bait piles out and shoot deer.
Yep.
Any neighborhood I know of, there's guys clamoring to hunt. Can I please hunt? Can I please get a deer from my freezer? I have guys begging me to shoot does all the time. I'm like, I don't need to shoot any. They're way too low right now.
Right.
So when you have a massive amount of the public that's clamoring for access, clamoring for the opportunity to hunt and to shoot deer, and then you're paying guys to sharpshoot them, it makes no sense.
with our
That's
money.
broke. That's broken government 101.
Yeah.
That's corruption. That's broken government. Uh, Horrible policy at best.
What I
That's
do,
Minnesota,
yeah, and that is Minnesota, which is a whole nother,
run by lunatics.
planet, right? And I'm a firm believer there's no such thing as a blue state, just blue cities. So most people in Minnesota, I think, are more lockstep with us. But anyway, I didn't mean to make this about Minnesota, Skip, but I did think that was interesting, that they basically just pulled out of the whole, hey, we're going to play God and kill all these deer. I agree with you 100% that Iowa's done a good job balancing it, or attempting to balance it. And I also think if there's irony in anything, the biggest bucks in the state of Wisconsin are coming out of the southwest corner, where they attempted to eradicate the herd. And when that thing sprung back, boy, there's been some hammers coming out of there. So all of that said, my goal today, Skip, was to get enlightened on the difference between these two diseases, obviously. And the fact of the matter is, I'm trying to help shift some of the focus from the public to EHD versus CWD.
Yep. So, in a nutshell, really, EHD needs more funding. The politicians need to hear from you. When I say most of the public out there doesn't know the difference between EHD and CWD,
Yep.
politicians fall right into that. You ask 90% of the people at the Capitol, in the House or the Senate, you know the difference between EHD and CWD? They have no clue.
Well,
They have
namely, it's
no
because they're not even hunters. Like they don't
Exactly,
care. Yeah.
exactly. They're just like the regular public, so they need to be informed. They need to know that EHD is devastating this state. CWD is not.
Yep.
And anybody needs to understand that without a cure, you can wipe out all the deer. You can spend $1 billion on this. It is going to be for nothing without a cure, natural resistance, some kind of immunity, deer that are able to live to long age with it. I think there's so many unknowns with the CWD world. And I think on that spectrum of it's the extinction of white-tailed deer to it's a made-up disease, there's so much gray area in the middle. We really don't know, even the experts on both sides. And there's a whole lot of evidence that gets ignored on all these folks that will explain the prion differently. That'll say it's not a threat, or it's non-existent, or it can be treated with humic acid. And I'm not saying they're all exactly right, or they are right, or they're wrong, but we need to look at all sides of this debate. And I think people are now. And I think the one issue that has caused people to really question and be skeptical of CWD was the whole incident with COVID. People going,
Mhm.
okay, the government said this, the government told me to do this. They said, the disease would do this. And this was billions, if not trillions of dollars worth of impact, and all the brightest minds in the world that came up with this. And they got it wrong on how many different things. So
Right.
so if they got it wrong on that, with that kind of economy, manpower, and brains behind it, could the government have some things wrong with CWD? I think the general public is going, yeah, I'm extremely skeptical, and I don't blame them for being extremely
Right.
skeptical. I think it's wise to be skeptical of government.
Well, and the other stat I'm going to throw at you, in the DNR report that I read, I mean, they would put a dollar figure to tangible value of what deer hunting means to Iowa, and the number they put on it's $181 million a year. Um, Huge number, obviously, from a funding perspective. I'd love to even back into how much money's been thrown at CWD, in comparison to the tangible number they're giving us at $181 million a year. I mean, that's a boatload of cash.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's a lot more than that.
uh, it,
It's
it, I get it. You know what I mean? I totally get it, and I'm just trying to use their facts or their stats. Let me
absolutely.
put it that way. But in either case, Skip, let's shift gears slightly, because there's some pending legislation, and like I said, God bless you for being involved at the level you're involved with the Iowa Bowhunter Association and the Iowa Sportsman's Club, both of which are very worthy organizations, and what they're doing for the general public, the hunters, and becoming our voice. If you're not a member of this stuff, you got to get behind this stuff, and put your money where your mouth is if you care. Um, Skip, let's talk about, and I'm going to go right down the list. I got three of them. HF65, that one speaks to depredation tags. They're saying any landowner with, basically that can prove they have $1,000 or more of damage. And it could be crop damage, it could be tree damage, it could be, basically anything ag or horticultural related. They're in essence going to go, and I don't know how they're going to divvy these tags or who's making those decisions, but it's again another shed buck season, January 11th through the 31st. And from what I read, it's wide open. Rifles, crossbows, any way you could kill a deer, they're going to let you kill a deer.
Let me run through that one real quick.
Yep.
That absolutely has no biological sound rationale behind it. Shooting deer late season is the absolute worst time to control your deer numbers. They're artificially concentrated. You're not shooting resident deer on your ground. Any biologist, any DNR official that has any bit of knowledge will tell you the time when you control the doe numbers on your farm is early season.
Yep.
Those are your resident does. You don't know if you're shooting a deer from 3 miles away late season. The time to do it is early season. Now, with the depredation tags the way they are, you have in the summertime, I can start shooting them in the summer all the way through into January as it is, like 5-6 months. And if I go to the biologist and they come out to my farm and say, you have significant deer damage, and they don't say like, hey, I know you think you have deer damage, but that's actually because you have about 1,000 raccoons out here. That stuff gets caught, and they're right. That's a big problem, and the deer get blamed for stuff like raccoons or turkeys or whatever. So a biologist can currently come out and say, here you go. You've got a true problem, and it's a 5-minute meeting, a little inspection. You can get depredation tags and shoot them in the summer all the way through season as it is. Even without depredation tags, I have 4 months of season to go shoot deer off my farms. There's anybody with a deer problem right now can get depredation tags. They can go to their CO. Any CO in the state of Iowa has a standing list of people who want to just come out and shoot does. So, and that list never gets met. So there's a solution right there. Call your CO if you have too many does. There's a group of people who show up and just shoot does. You can enroll your ground and walk on land, and there's all sorts of financial incentives for that. One thing the DNR might do is if you're an angry farmer, you could get put on a list for public access. Basically, like walk on and say, hey, these farms have been listed by such and such farmer. You can walk on there and you can hunt deer and shoot deer.
Kill them. Yep.
Yeah. And how many of these farmers complaining about deer, there's a pile of them that are like, oh yeah, but I do lease out my land for $20 an acre to hunters.
Right.
So the data on ag destruction, in substantial areas, it comes down to about half a bushel of corn per acre, which is approximately $2 a bushel.
Yep.
Well, there's a lot of guys who lease their ground up for $20 to $30 an acre, and then they have more deer. But $2 an acre is what a lot of the data shows is happening with crop damage. And again, so here's the point. We have existing tools. We have depredation tags. We have hunters who are willing to shoot does. We have financial incentives for walk on land. And my question is where do all these things come from to add all this stuff? It comes from Farm Bureau.
Yeah.
And here's my main question for everybody listening, or my main point. Does Farm Bureau promote to their members through their newsletter, through any of their literature on their website, the depredation program, the solution with the CO having a standing list of people who will shoot does, incentives for making your ground into walk-on hunting, and allowing public access on your land? The Farm Bureau is not promoting that at all, which begs the question, do they really want to solve the problem? And I don't have the answer, but they're not, and that needs to change. And we're going to make that change, or at least call them out so people understand that they have all these tools and they're not being utilized. And the politicians, when you tell them this, that there is all these tools available to control deer numbers, their eyes light up. Like, really? I didn't realize there was all these tools. Why aren't we talking about this?
Right.
This is simple awareness. Simple. We already have the tools to address the issue. You do not need to throw rifles into going into February. It's madness. Absolute madness, when the vast majority of this state is hurting for deer numbers, hurting.
Yeah.
And that's the pressure these politicians are actually getting. And what the DNR is hearing right now is, my deer numbers are really low. I'm concerned. And guys and gals in the legislature who are typically anti-deer lately have been saying, I've been getting a lot of heat for low deer numbers, and we actually might need a little relief there.
Yeah.
People are very
Good.
anti-deer. Very important. Join the IBA, go get a lifetime membership. Join the Iowa Sportsman's Club. Go to the banquet at the Classic, support them any way you can. Talk to both organizations. Ask them how you can help, volunteer, spend a little bit of time with them. Very easy stuff. Maybe if you have some people skills, go to the Capitol for some of these subcommittee meetings. I can help there. Go to these DNR listening sessions and bring an army. They need to hear that the shed buck season needs to go, that deer numbers are not great, that things are hurting. Your politicians and the DNR need to hear the voices of the hunters. If we do all those things, we will fix this problem and things will rebound. I assure you we will fix this. We will win. If people sit on their hands, do nothing, and expect everybody else to do the heavy lifting and won't show up or write a little check or do a little bit of work, these things don't get fixed. But as a group, as we grow this army, we can absolutely fix these problems, and we are fixing them.
It's a big voice. I mean, it's amazing to me how the tide's already started to change just in the last couple of years on awareness. But awesome follow up on that one, Skip. The other one I wanted to touch on, and obviously you've been part of a zillion land deals. That's what we kind of specialize in. The non-resident tags, HF22. So the listeners understand there's 6,000 statewide non-resident tags, I guess is how I'm going to say it. 6,000 a year, up to 35% of that can be used for a bow. So whatever, call it a third. This bill proposes that 600 of the 6,000 or 10% would be dedicated to non-resident landowners with 40 plus acres of land that is zoned agricultural. That's verbatim, or close to verbatim. I wrote it down that way. Skip, talk to us on that. I mean, I know or have had a periphery into a lot of the stats behind the tags, the allocation, so on and so forth. I mean, is this a game changer, or is this another, kind of throw your hands up in the air, this does nothing? I guess I don't know. I want your opinion on it.
So they just want a stepping stone. They want a way in the door. And they're going to start out with 600 tags, and they're going to hope everybody rolls over. If they get that, that's blood in the water for them. They will ask for 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, or what they really are shooting for. This is their strategy. They want it so anybody with 40 acres will get a tag. That's their goal, period.
Sure.
And we know how this story ends. I've watched it in Illinois. I've watched it in Kansas, where you open those floodgates open, and you, like Kansas, for example, which I own land. If you have 80 acres or more, you get a guaranteed tag. The amount of people that had 320 acres that are like, oh, I'm going to section this up 4 ways,
Yep.
and the ground got segmented is staggering. 80 acres is worth more than 79 acres in Kansas by a substantial amount. So if you make it 40 acres, the state will turn into 40s.
Yep.
And if you go down what they want, follow those stepping stones. So it's everybody with 40 acres gets a tag. Everything in this state, not everything, but it will go very fast.
Anything with
everything
timber,
will get broke. Everything will get broke down into 40 acres over time. It will all owned by non-residents or the residents who are lucky enough to get into it. Your prices probably will double or triple within a very short time. And the hunting quality will go down the tubes, just like it did in Illinois. When I was spending time there and that stuff started getting segmented up, the prices got so high that some people were like, I can't afford a 160. So it gets segmented up to an 80 just because the prices were so obscene.
Yep.
And all these guys would come from around the country to Illinois when it was great. And they'd say, well, dang, man, a 2-year-old that's got a 130-inch rack is a giant where I'm from, or a 150 with kickers that's a 3-year-old. That's a mega where I'm from. And they'd start shooting piles of them. And that state just got run off a cliff. That's all that would happen here. And it would happen far worse because we have so much less habitat than these other examples. Kansas has far more habitat. People don't realize this, but it does. It has far more habitat. It has more deer. Illinois has 2 or 3 times the habitat that Iowa does. Far more deer. That state got segmented up and ruined. We are very fragile at less than 7% timber right now. And a deer herd that's hurting drastically, that's definitely under 500,000. The lowest deer herd in all of the Midwest is Iowa.
Yep.
It's the lowest population in the Midwest. All of our neighboring states have more habitat and more deer, all of them. So it's a very fragile system, and you start segmenting the farms up, and you create a situation where it's completely locked up. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for the resource. It's not good for the everyday hunter. I'll be fine. I'll be just fine. And heck, I can start segmenting up some parcels and make a fortune. I don't want that though. I don't want to see our states sold out and exploited. And that's all that this is. It's a strategy to stepstone into what they really want, and that's guaranteed tags for these little parcels of land, or if there's really any merit to it, and I'm not for this, but if there really was merit to it, you wouldn't make it 40 acres. You'd make it 400 acres,
Yeah.
because anybody would understand that segmentation in any regard is not good for the resource. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for management. It's not good for anything. If you really did want to address it, you'd make it 400 acres. So farms maybe got put together and got bigger, and then you'd have another argument. Well, now you're making it for the elite, for the rich man. But there's far more merit to that.
Right.
There's far more merit, and I'm saying don't do any of it. It's leave the regulations alone. It's already been so liberalized. We've had all these new seasons, all of these new weapons. We have special interests coming for our state nonstop. No, absolutely not. This cannot pass. We know what it is. It's a stepping stone. It's going to get shut down, and it should get shut down. There is no merit to it.
Sure. Amen, brother. Preach it, Skip. Preach it. And the last one, we're gonna end on what I think is a kind of a funny note. That's even getting talked about. But HF 23 prohibits firearms being discharged from a vehicle, and if you're busted, it's a $30 fine. Like, do we even really need to talk about that one?
The stuff they come up with is just so ridiculous, and that's what happens when you elect politicians who are all of a sudden deer experts, and they're geniuses in their field. And some constituent that gave them a nice donation will suggest this, and they'll write a bill for it. Yeah,
Right.
I think it'd be cool, man, if we could shoot turkeys with rifles. I mean, that was just 2 years ago. I'm like, what? What, you want turkeys? You want rifles for turkeys?
Oh,
And it usually they come after the deer, because the deer is what's the last quality hunting experience in Iowa. You don't see all this legislation for pheasants.
right,
You see a little bit for turkeys, but you don't see all the attacks on turkeys, because there's not all this money to be made. It's
right.
always for deer. And I always say to these people, you want rifles in January for deer. It's never happened before. We've never used rifles before. Why aren't you guys going after the bass fishermen? Every bass fisherman should be able to rifle bass out of their pond. Legalize rifles for bass. I mean, it's always deer, and that sounds like madness, but to me, shooting deer almost into February, 400 yards running with nubs that the antlers fell off. That's madness to me. It's as maddening as saying, yeah, I want to use my AR in my pond for bass.
Right.
They're equally obscene. And that late shed buck season, people can get it eliminated. We did before. Remember this. They had this about 8 or 9 years ago.
I do remember that.
And the hunter said, how did you guys pass this? Because the politicians were in charge. And the hunters rose up and said, get rid of this. And they did. And then they snuck it back in again under the guise of CWD. And it was done quietly, Farm Bureau interest there. And they got it back. And now with these listening sessions and the ability to contact your legislator, we can get it knocked out again. And we will.
Yep.
It needs to happen.
And the Iowa Bowhunter Association, like I said, I'm going to encourage everyone, go sign up for that. They'll actually proactively send you the legislation that our lobbyists are working on our behalf to counteract. They have a form section where you literally basically are just signing your name, and it goes straight to your House of Representative person or the senator or whatever. It makes it as simple as it could possibly be, but it's an awesome spot to just go get information about what's going on.
And it does make a huge difference. Funding these organizations, whether it's a donation, it goes 99.9% right to the fight, right to the lobbying, right to the Capitol. It gets right to work. The other thing with that link you're talking about is share that with everybody you know. When you get that message, and it's called Voter Voice, where you can send an email to your representative, everybody should be like, hey, I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to send it to 50 guys I
Sure.
know, and
Yep.
it'd take you 20 minutes in your text message, and have 50 other guys write in a message too, and have them keep forwarding it. And little things like that. It sounds so little, but it works. We'll absolutely dominate if people actually
Yeah.
do this. We are. We're winning. Make no mistake about it. Iowa's still an exceptionally good state. It's still exceptionally better than any neighboring state by a long shot. It's hurting, but we will recover. And we're going to win these things as long as people stay on the gas, continue to do things with IBA, Iowa Sportsman's Club, writing in. We're going to win. We have been winning, and all the bad bills you're not seeing this year, which we're not seeing a lot of them, is because of IBA and Iowa Sportsman Club behind the scenes
And
doing what they've been doing.
they know there's eyeballs out there now, looking at this stuff and picking it apart. So you're 100% right. And God bless you, Skip. Today's a big day in American history. Donald the Hammer back at the helm. Super stoked to see how that's going to go, because obviously his family, big hunters. I mean, I think they'd sit on here and have a conversation very similar to what we just had. So all of that said, Skip, can't thank you enough. This was a information packed one. We'll definitely bring you back on, Skip. I'd love to pick your brain on land management and how you're picking farms, what you're doing, what your priorities are. But I thought this one needed address and hit head on right now, because it's fresh in a lot of people's minds, and clearly it's trending right now. We need to raise awareness and to your point, keep the throttle down. So
Love it. Go
appreciate you.
Trump.
Yeah.
It's a great day.
Mega baby. Thanks, Skip.
Thank you.